Who was Esther in the Bible? Esther was an Israelite who became queen of Persia and rescued her people from a murderous plot to annihilate them. Her story is recorded in what they call the Old Testament, bearing her name. The story of Esther begins with a king's banquet, King Ahasuerus. He was the son of the famed Persian king Darius, who is mentioned in Ezra. Just as many pagan Gentiles do today, King Ahasuerus enjoyed putting on public display his wealth and power, which included feasts that sometimes lasted for as long as 180 days. During the feast that is mentioned in Esther chapter 1 verses 10 through 11, the king requested that his wife Queen Vashti come before the entire gathering of officials to show them her great beauty wearing her crown. Queen Vashti refused the king's request, and he became enraged. King Ahasuerus consulted his advisors in the law, who declared that Vashti had wronged all the people of the land. They feared that the women of Persia would hear of Vashti's refusal to obey her husband and began to despise their own husbands. They suggested that the king issue a decree throughout the land that Vashti could never again enter his presence. The king did so. In Esther 1:19 it reads, "If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment for him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it not be altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she." With Vashti now gone, the king was without a queen. Ahasuerus suggests he make a search for beautiful virgins throughout the land to find a new queen. Esther chapter 2 and verse 8. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan, the palace, to the custody of Haggai, and Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to do the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. Esther had been living in citadel of Susa, where the king also lived. She was the cousin of a Benjamite named Mordecai, who was also her guardian, adopting her as his own daughter when her parents died. Mordecai held an official position within the Persian government. When Esther was chosen as a candidate for queen, Mordecai instructed her not to reveal her Israelite background. Mordecai visited the king's harem daily to see how Esther was doing. Esther 2 and 11 says, "And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did, and what should become of her." Esther chapter 2 and verse 15. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. She also won the king's favor. He loved Esther more than all the women, and he made her queen. Sometime later, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate and overheard an assassination plot against Ahasuerus. He reported it to Queen Esther, who reported it to the king and gave Mordecai the credit. The plot didn't take place, and the plan was forgotten. As you can see in this scene, Esther's continued connection to Mordecai, as well as her integrity. Both Mordecai and Esther honored the king and wanted to protect him from his enemies. After this, the king appointed an evil man over his affairs. His name was Haman, and he despised the Israelite people. Haman was a descendant of Agag, king of Amalekites, a people who were Israel's sworn enemy for generations. Haman had a dark heart and a deeply rooted hate for the Israelites. He commanded the royal officials at the king's gate to kneel down and honor him. But Mordecai refused. The royal official spoke to Haman about this, being sure to tell Haman that Mordecai was an Israelite. Haman wanted not only to punish Mordecai, but sought to destroy all the Israelites, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus allowed Haman to do as he pleased in the matter, and a decree went out to the provinces that on a certain day, which had been chosen by Lot or Purim, the people were to destroy, to kill, and annihilate all Israelites, young and old, women and children, in one day. The people were confused, and there was great mourning among all Israelites. Queen Esther was unaware of the plot against the Israelites, but she found out when her maids and eunuchs told her that Mordecai was in distress. Esther sent a messenger to Mordecai to find out what was wrong. Mordecai sent his cousin a copy of the order and asked her to go into the king's presence to beg him for mercy and plead with him for her people. There was a law against entering into the king's presence uninvited, and Esther had not been invited by the king for the past 30 days. Through her intermediary, Esther reported to Mordecai her seemingly inability to help. He responded, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Israelites. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Israelites from another place, but you and your father's house will perish." In a great display of faith, Esther agreed. She asked the Israelites to fast for her for 3 days, while she and her maids also fasted. "Then I will go to the king, and although it is against the law, if I perish, I perish." When Esther approached the king, she was literally risking her life. But Ahasuerus was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand, a sign that he accepted her presence. She invited Ahasuerus and Haman to a banquet that day. The king called for Haman and came to the meal, where he asked what she would like, even up to half the kingdom. Esther invited the two men to attend another banquet the following day, where she would present her request. The men agreed. Ahasuerus had difficulty sleeping that night and ordered the record of his reign to be read to him. Amazingly, the account he heard was that of Mordecai uncovering the assassination plot and saving the king's life. Meanwhile, Haman went home, gathered his friends and wife, and told them how honored he had been. But he had seen Mordecai on the way home, which had dampened his spirits. His wife and friends suggested that Haman build gallows on which to hang Mordecai. Just as King Ahasuerus was thinking over the fact that he had not honored Mordecai for his life-saving act, Haman came in to talk to the king about hanging Mordecai. The king asked for Haman's opinion about how to honor a man whom the king delights to honor. Haman, thinking that Ahasuerus was referring to him, suggested parading the man through the town wearing a royal robe and riding on a horse the king had ridden, while proclaiming, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." Ahasuerus ordered Haman to do this immediately for Mordecai. Haman obeyed the king and honored the man he hated the most. He then told the events to his wife and friends. With more foresight than they probably realized, his wise man and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Israelite people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him." The king's eunuchs arrived and took Haman to Esther's banquet. There Esther told the king that her people had been sold to be annihilated. Showing great respect and humility, Esther said that had they only been sold into slavery, she would have held her peace, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. The king was shocked that someone would dare to do such a thing to his queen's people. Esther revealed that the man behind this plot was in fact Haman. King Ahasuerus exited the banquet enraged. Haman stayed behind to plead with Esther for his life. When King Ahasuerus returned to the banquet, he ordered that Haman be killed by the very gallows that he built for Mordecai. After Haman was dead, King Ahasuerus gave Esther all of Haman's estate and gave Mordecai his signet ring, essentially giving Mordecai the same authority in the kingdom Haman previously had. King Ahasuerus eventually ordered another decree to be written to counter the first. This one gave the Israelites the right to defend themselves against anyone who would attack them. Some enemies did still attack on the previous appointed day, but the Israelites were victorious over them. Esther's bravery and faith in Yahuwah are a testament to the trust she had in the living Elohim. As we can see here in this story, the Most High uses who He chooses. And not only that, He maneuvers every aspect of life to position people, governments, and situations for His plans and purpose. In this specific situation, He had to send an Israelite woman to a Persian king to bring down the evils that came against the Israelites. The Most High strengthened and prepared her to intercede for her people, and she was faithful and obeyed. Esther obviously trusted in Yahuwah, and she humbly served Him no matter what the cost might be. Another victorious story that I get to end by saying, we know that Yahuwah causes all things to work together for the good of those who love Him, and those who are called according to His purpose. This concludes my video, and until my next message, Shalom.